Welcome, everybody, to the June 11th Cupertino City Council, City Planning Commission meeting, and we're going to start with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, for this republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I guess we do this. We're good.
All right, roll call. Commissioner Moore.
Here.
Commissioner Fung.
Present.
Vice Chair Saxena.
Here.
Chairperson Wong.
Here.
Commissioner Takahashi is absent.
All right. Cool. Well, let's look at the minutes. So, item on the agenda, approval of minutes. Any comments, questions? I was not here, so I will abstain, but we'll go ahead.
So there's actually an error in the minutes about the approval of the, let's see, I made the motion on the issue related to, I'm trying to remember what it was.
Go back.
The main issue on our agenda. I think it was showing that
Public
you were
storage?
doing, yes, it was right, the public storage hearing. So that would be a change that we should make.
Do you want to read out what change that is, the correction
No,
is?
I would love to. I have a syncing error with my Dropbox, so I don't actually have the text of that with me.
Let me pull it up. Let me pull it up for you.
Yeah.
Let's see. 611 and oh, would be archive. Let's see.
Yeah, go back.
Yeah, as we're looking at the minutes, give us a little time here. For those who are new here, you can pick up comment cards when we get to the oral communications portion, and you can pick up the blue cards, fill them out. Please give them over to, I'm sorry, hi, how are you? So, yeah, hang it over to, put that into the, there's a little file thing over there, and fill out your comment cards, give us your name, and we can do the comments there at that point in time.
So actually, Commissioner, if we know the item which you've identified, we'll go
Yeah.
back and take a look at that again and
I'll have
make
it here
that
in a
correction.
second.
Is this item 3, the storage, public storage?
Yeah, it's item 3, public storage.
Okay, so it says moved by Wong and seconded by Takahashi to recommend to the City Council the approval. So, yeah, it's item 3.
Should be Fung, actually.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that was me, so it should be.
I did watch the whole
moved
thing.
by Fung,
Yeah, that's what it is.
second by Takahashi.
Okay, we'll make that correction and come back.
And otherwise, with that edit, I would move that we adopt the minutes.
You can do that as well.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. Let's see. Let's get this thing going. All right. Let's vote. All right. Everyone's voted. Okay. All right. Minutes approved. 3-0-1. Okay. Next item on the agenda is oral communications. Do we have any cards? Okay, take a look. Once again, we limit you 3 minutes. Please feel free to say whatever you want. We might necessarily not respond. Okay. So far, we have no items here. These are all for agenda items number 3 and 4. So, you have oral communications? You want to pick up a card? You can do an oral communication. You can have comments after we do number 2. So, we do it after we start. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, let's move on to study session item number 2. So, study session number 2 is a presentation on the below market rate housing program, and let's see what our staff has for us.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Good evening, Chair Wang and Commissioners. My name is Carrie Husler, and I am the Housing Manager. This evening, I would like to provide you with an overview of the city's housing program. This is an update to the information presented at the City Council study session in May of 2018. I am happy to share that just this week, 19 seniors have begun the process of moving into their new homes at the Veranda. The veranda is a low-income senior development with 19 units, and it is the most recent addition to the city's affordable housing portfolio. So there's a lot of information on this slide. I'll walk you through it. The city's 2014-2022 housing element is a comprehensive 8-year plan to address housing needs in Cupertino. The housing element was adopted by City Council and certified by the California Department of Housing and Community Development in 2015. In accordance with the city's housing element, all new residential and/or non-residential developments are required to help mitigate project-related impacts on affordable housing needs. As required by Chapter 19.172 of the Cupertino Municipal Code, the below-market rate housing mitigation program procedural manual, or as we refer to it as the Housing Mitigation Manual, it establishes procedures for implementing the affordable housing mitigation provisions of the city's BMR housing portfolio. The city requires development of affordable housing in projects of 7 units or more. The payment of housing mitigation in lieu fees may be paid in projects with 6 or fewer units only. Housing mitigation in lieu fees are based on the most recent 2015 Nexus study and assessed in accordance with the Housing Mitigation Manual. These fees are adjusted annually based on CPI. As part of the work program, an updated Nexus study is underway, and a draft will be brought to the Commission this summer for review. So the city generates affordable housing through its housing mitigation program, also known as the BMR program. 15% of units in each new development are reserved for the BMR program. The Housing Mitigation Manual includes language that allowed the city to implement a 15% inclusionary rental policy when state law was amended in 2017 with AB 1505, otherwise known as the Palmer Fix. As required by the Housing Mitigation Manual, BMR unit design must be comparable to market rate units in terms of unit type, number of bedrooms per unit, and quality of exterior appearance and construction. The city also requires that BMR units are dispersed throughout the residential project. So 60% of residential units are made available to very low-income households, and 40% are available to low-income households. 50% of ownership units are made available to median income households, and the other half are available to moderate income households. And I'll go into the actual income statistics in a few slides. So I just talked about the program design. Now I'm going to talk about how the program is administered and who is served by the city's BMR program. So the current version of the Policy and Procedures Manual for administering deed-restricted affordable housing units, otherwise known as the BMR Manual, was adopted by City Council in March of 2018. The BMR Manual is the day-to-day operational manual for the BMR program. The city contracts with the program administrator, Hello Housing, to screen and place qualified households in city BMR units. Some of the highlights of the program: the waitlist application period is open annually during the month of October, and the waitlist is established for the coming year. And as part of our policies, priority points are given to public agency employees, Cupertino residents, and Cupertino employees. And then another main factor of eligibility is income limits. So new income limits just came out in May for 2019. So we use maximum income limits adjusted for household size published by the California Department of Housing and Community Development annually for Santa Clara County. So the same income limits we use here in Cupertino are used by the rest of the cities in Santa Clara County. In May, it looks like income limits went up by about 5% in Santa Clara County. So the area median income for a household of 4 is $131,400. So in our below market rate rental program, we have 142 units. We have 63 one-bedroom units, 71 two-bedroom units, and 8 three-bedroom units. The rental program is designed to assist very low and low-income households. We require that each household complete a recertification process annually for compliance. So each year we monitor all households in the unit, and if eligible, they will continue to sign a lease with the property manager. Some more detail about the BMR rental program. Here's a list of the properties throughout Cupertino that have BMR units. They're spread throughout 9 apartment complexes in Cupertino. In addition to the first 8 properties that are listed in the inventory of affordable housing units in the housing element, I wanted to highlight number 9, Greenwood Court. The city gained 4 new BMR units in Greenwood Court in 2017 through a partnership with West Valley Community Services. We provided $400,000 to West Valley for the Greenwood Court renovation project, which resulted in 4 new 3-bedroom BMR units for extremely low and very low-income households. So we got large units, and then we got 2 extremely low-income units through that partnership. Now on to the city's ownership program. We have 121 units, 15 one-bedroom, 53 two-bedroom, 45 three-bedroom units, and 8 four-bedroom units. And all of the units in our ownership program have a 99-year resale restriction. So the ownership program is designed to assist median and moderate income households. We monitor each of the 121 households annually for compliance. And then, as I mentioned, each homeowner enters into a 99-year resale restriction with the city at the time of the purchase. In addition to the city's BMR housing stock, there are other housing tools available to the city for the development of affordable housing. For example, annually, the city releases a notice of funding availability and a call for projects for our BMR affordable housing funds and CDBG funds. Developers can also apply for the county's Measure A funds, and the veranda, which I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, is the first development in the county to house residents using these Measure A funds. So our housing website has a lot of information about the program, a lot of resources. You can find all of our housing documents, a GIS map of the city's BMR portfolio, and information about housing programs and resources in the region, including agencies that we fund through grants such as Project Sentinel for fair housing needs and for tenant-landlord dispute. So we have a lot of housing and human service grant funds that support our affordable housing program. So thank you for your time this evening. I am available for any questions.
Thank you for your presentation. Let me start with a quick question, though. Do we have a housing trust set up in Cupertino, or have we looked into that, setting up a housing trust fund program?
Sure. In Santa Clara County, there's the Housing Trust of Silicon Valley.
It's of Silicon Valley, right?
Yeah, we have not explored that idea here in Cupertino on our own, but I know we've funded the veranda through the Housing Trust with our dollars.
Okay, thank you.
I had some questions, and these are primarily for my knowledge. You mentioned that the BMR housing has to be dispersed throughout the community which is getting built. Do we have any specific guidelines of what dispersal means? Is it like, can it be different buildings in a multi-building complex, or is it a different floor, or is it that any random apartment could be BMR within the complex?
I would need to get back to you on that level of detail. I do know just from some experience that they have to be spread throughout the different buildings if an apartment complex is more than one building, but beyond that, I can send the information through and give
Okay.
you that level of detail.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
And in general, I think we have got to that specified in whatever document or plan we have for BMR housing,
Okay.
what that means.
Any other questions from the commissioners?
Yeah.
So I'm curious. I think I've probably asked you this before. Under the current system, we count ADU units. This actually touches a little on the other one of the other items today. We count ADU units as moderate BMR units for the purpose of the RENA count. And I was wondering where that comes from and why we do that.
I understand that it's allowed in our housing element. When our housing element comes up the next cycle, I think we can look into that further. I'm not sure if anyone had anything to add on.
Yeah, I think, my concern about that in the past had been that ADU units that are constructed without deed restriction or rental limits actually are they're counted right now as BMR units. So that it seems like it's an anomaly in the housing element, if that's where it's coming from. Thanks.
Sure.
Go ahead.
I have a question about the income limits from the BMR manual for not very low, but for low income, because I'm looking at page 7, and I'm seeing that it says, for low income units, assume household income at 60% of median income. But I think that you showed us something different, like 50 to 80 for low income. So I was wondering if you have any idea where this 60% came from that's in the manual.
I believe that's for pricing. Which section are you referring to?
This is 2.3.5 initial maximum sales prices and rents of BMR units. And then it's B, rental BMR units. And then it's defining what low income and very low income would be.
Sure. So that, when pricing a new BMR unit for a 50% household, they price it using 60%, so it's more affordable to that household. So there's formulas that set the initial rent rate and set the initial ownership rate, and they tend to be 10% higher. So then when the household comes in, they have to be 50%, but the calculation to determine the rent was based on 60%, so there's a cushion for affordability. Let me look at the actual manual and see if I can give you a better answer. Let me look at the policy. And I can look that up while we're discussing. Do you have it on yours? Okay.
Yeah, and just for clarification as well, as you're looking that up, you can have different percentages for your rental as well as your ownership housing rates. So different cities have different percentages. We decided to keep it 15% for both. Is that correct?
For the income limits?
No,
For
for the
the-
available units in a new construction.
Sure. So we have it at 15% now. The BMR linkage fee study that's coming to you this summer
Yep.
will include a review of increasing the inclusionary housing percentages to 20 and 25%. So we will look at the economic feasibility of that and have a chance to.
You can have different numbers. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They don't
Right.
have to be
I
the same.
believe if you
'Cause I
go
think Mountain Dew is
below-
like 10 or 15 or something like that as well.
I believe if you go below 15%, it has to be reviewed by HCD, but to raise it, I think you need an economic feasibility study, and I
Yeah.
welcome support.
Yeah,
on that.
HCD won't punish you for raising it, so.
Will you be looking into having extremely low income added to the mix?
Yes, as part of the BMR linkage fee study, we're looking at that, and it's also part of our housing strategies work program item for this next year too. Just looking at all types of levels of affordability.
Go ahead, Sid.
May I go ahead? Okay, I actually had a question about the VLI to LI ratios, which you put forward there in terms of the distribution. Is that mandated by state law or some other guidelines, or is it something which is completely at the discretion of the city? Like, I think it was 60 or 50. Yeah.
Sure. Ellen, are you familiar with that answer? I'll have to get back to you on that
Okay.
too.
Thank you.
I think that that's possible, that's actually following the density bonus law. They have ratios that are similar. They favor very low over low income in the ratio for qualifying for a density bonus multiplier.
Yeah, which doesn't qualify for moderates. Yeah.
And then in that model, ELI and moderate doesn't actually have any value, which is, I think, why the current housing mitigation manual for the city doesn't address those segments.
Yeah, we have some gaps that we may want to clean up as well.
Yeah, and then density bonus is, again, coming as a state mandate, or is it a local
Yeah,
thing?
that's great.
It's a state mandate for ELI. So.
Okay.
Well, actually, it's probably not ELI. I think that's only VL and EL are the things that earn you the bonus.
Yeah, I'll give you
Okay. So I'd love to get more clarification on that also, about how it is and what discretion does the city have and what are the factors which affect it.
well,
I would agree with that, because once you start talking about density bonus, you start working into the concessions, and then we probably want to talk about that sometime too.
And understand what are the different parameters and dimensions which we have to influence that.
which will change our allocation tables as well. So.
Yes. If nobody else has a question, I have one more.
Oh, please go ahead.
Okay. So there was a resale restriction on the owned units. Is there any rental restriction also? That if you get a BMR unit, you can't sell it for 99 years, but can you rent it out at full market rate?
So one of the main restrictions is it needs to be your primary residence. And that is one of the things we monitor for annually to make sure that it's still
Okay, and
your
if
main
you,
home.
Are you talking about ADUs or are you talking about the apartment complexes?
no, the ownership.
The
units.
ownership, yeah.
So-
The townhomes, single-family residence, condos.
So even though we have a 99 resale restriction, NG has to be your primary residence. If that happens, then if suppose somebody wants to move to a bigger house or whatever, what happens to them? Or they move out of the area for whatever reason. What happens to the unit? What do they?
Sure. So anyone can sell a unit at any time, even the next day after they buy it. It's resale restricted for those 99 years. So the same formula that set the sales price based off income limits when you moved in is then used to calculate the resale price
Okay.
with any percentage of capital improvements included. So if someone does some nice improvements to the home and gets city approval, we can add a percentage to the sales price as a way to encourage folks to maintain their homes.
Okay.
And so what would happen in that event is when someone goes to sell their home, they would notify the city, and then we would go to the wait list and bring forward the next eligible buyer based off of our priority points.
Okay. Thank you.
How many people are on our wait list at the moment?
We have over 400 on our wait list.
Would you happen to know how many would have like priority points that you mentioned? And could you say again what the priority points come from?
Sure. So the priority points are for Cupertino employees, employees of Cupertino throughout the city, and then Cupertino residents, and then on top of that, if you are a public agency employee in Cupertino, a school district employee, post office, city, police, fire, there's an extra priority for that.
Okay, so what happens if you're a school teacher in CUSD and you're working in a school within the Cupertino boundaries, and then you move over to a Sunnyvale school, but you're still in CUSD? Would you still qualify?
Sure. So you would, it's where your employer determines your home base. So if your home base is in Sunnyvale, we wouldn't be able to give the priority point for a Cupertino public agency employee. But if your home base is in one of the school district schools in Cupertino, then you would get the priority point.
So geographical bounds, not school district boundaries.
Right. We leave it up to the employer to determine the home base.
Yeah, actually, I would love to also love to see the distribution of city employees, CUSD employees, and others in that 400. And if we have something similar for rental, that how much of those people are in that list, and also what kind of income or housing level would they qualify for? Like, would they qualify for low income, moderate, and what on?
Yep, maybe as a follow-on to that, if it's possible to generate that breakdown for the current BMR residents as well as for, I don't know, the wait list, it's maybe, you kind of know because they filled out an application, but it would be interesting to see, you know, how much did the preference points come into play in the current tenants?
Okay.
And yeah, just public information. I believe we're having a BMR workshop September 12th. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So ahead of the October waitlist, we provide a community event, and this year it will be on September 12th. And we give an hour overview of the BMR program, walk people through one-on-one how to apply. We've made the application as user-friendly as possible because it really is just reserving a spot on the wait list. And if selected, then we will hold someone's hand through the actual eligibility and application process till they get into the unit. So it's a question and answer session with an overview of the city's program, and the BMR program administrator is available to meet with folks after who have specific questions that are pretty detailed and just to help people apply.
All right. Well, thank you. I think we might have some cards. Let's go check to see what we have for item 2. Go ahead, Commissioner Moore.
I just wanted to add one thing that I thought was a little bit confusing is that the 15% that you referenced, that is coming out of the general plan housing element, page 25, I believe. And then we also have the Cupertino Municipal Code, I believe that's 19172, and that seems to be authorizing the formation of the BMR manual. And then on top of that, we then have the BMR manual itself, which is Resolution 15037, which doesn't include in it the 15%. And so it's kind of odd that we're seeing the 15% sort of separated out in the general plan, and then the 60-40 split, just talking about the rental units, seeing that separate sitting in the BMR manual. It seems that when you are looking at this, you might want to put the percentage required in the BMR manual, and so it's all tidy and together, because it was a little confusing trying to follow that thread.
Yeah, for some context, I think that a number of new planning commissioners have been basically looking at these manuals and rectifying what's been passed, what's in the manual, what's in the code, and we're finding a lot of discrepancies. And I'd like to note in the minutes that this is probably one we should probably rectify and try to put some clarity in.
Sure, and I will take note of that. I can help clean it up a little bit just for conversation. The manuals have such similar names that the Housing Mitigation Manual is the BMR program design. The BMR manual is the day-to-day applicant eligibility. So I just wanted to point that out too, because I think the Housing Mitigation Manual often gets referred to as the BMR manual. So we try when we can to clear that up.
I think also, around this specific point, the date of passage for the BMR mitigation manual, the implementation manual, was prior to the Palmer fix. So, at that point, there wasn't a possibility of having a specific requirement called out in the manual, other than, should those units exist, it would split like. So I don't believe there were any units that were rental BMR units that were allocated under that plan. They were always negotiated, whether it's the Hamptons or wherever.
Yeah, and the Palmer fix supersedes everything, so that's part of it. So, okay. All right, well, hey, let's open up to questions and the public comments. So first person here, Kim James, Cupertino, please come on up. And I'll give you 3 minutes, and you'll hear a little beep with about 30 seconds to go.
Hi, I'm Kim James, and I'm a resident of Cupertino for the last 18 years. I actually own a BMR, and so when I saw the presentation being done today, that's why I kind of wanted to wait to see what was being presented so I knew what to say. But if it wasn't for that program, I would not be living here. I've been a teacher for 25 years and in the district for 23 of those 25 years. So when that opportunity came up, it was perfect timing for me because I was pregnant and I had a kid, so that meant 4, technically. Looking at your numbers now, though, there's no way a teacher in Cupertino in the first 5 years would be able to be put in a median or moderate range. They would have to be in the low or extremely low. And I was kind of looking up some numbers too, because there's over 1,700 employees just in our district. And if you take out the higher end ones, like the superintendents and the principals and et cetera, the teachers themselves, there's got to be at least 1,500 then. I don't remember what your number was for the housing, like how many houses there were. There's obviously more rentals. But it
121.
makes for a very small amount when you've got 400 on the waiting list. And if you ever look at the Cupertino Union School District Board minutes and you look at the personnel reports, how many teachers are leaving, if you don't have a spouse that makes enough money to help subsidize what you make in this area, they're leaving, to cheaper pastures. So one of the things I did want to do is make sure that you guys understand that we need more BMR housing. And to answer one of your questions is, when we first applied for this 18 years ago, our house has only increased in value about $150,000 since we purchased it 18 years ago. And that's all based on HUD numbers, because I just did a home equity line of credit in order to, so I know what my new numbers are based on what we purchased. So it does increase slightly. Obviously, our payments are way lower than anybody in this area, but it helps. I do want to point out that as a teacher and also part of a large network of teachers in our district, we don't want to hear about subsidization. There was, back when Wendy was our superintendent, there was a big fight with that. And so when I spend 5 years in college to pursue a dream, to teach the future, I don't want to have to lean back on the fact that I need to be subsidized in order to live where I work. So just to keep that in mind, we do need more BMR housing. Yes, we're going to have to compromise with how we get it, but just keep that in mind, and it's been a great deal. It meant a great deal to me.
Thank you, Kim. Our next speaker, Janet Van Zoren. I think I got that right.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Janet Van Zoren, and I'm a 43-year resident, and I'm here representing the Housing Choices Cupertino Task Force. Before I make the comments that I was going to make, I just want to reiterate what was just said. I just find it so hard to believe that we expect so much of our teachers, and yet we value them so little with what they're paid and with what housing they can receive. And anything you can do to help change that, I think, would be a great asset to the entire community. That said, a couple of things about the BMR program. It has never included ELI housing, extremely low-income housing. And I think we should do what we can to change that, and I think we should do that as soon as we possibly can. So I plead with you to try to find a way to make that change. Also, I think that there's a problem with the point system. It's discriminatory against people with developmental disabilities in many ways. First of all, the requirement for employment here in the city of Cupertino. For many of those individuals, that's a requirement that they will never be able to fulfill. Some will, but many will not. Secondly, the requirement or the points that you get if you're working for the police department or the sheriff's department or whatever, firemen. Most people with developmental disabilities in no way are ever going to be able to qualify for that point. So effectively, the point system discriminates against people with developmental disabilities, and that needs to be corrected. The other thing I was thinking is that we need to change perhaps the terminology BMR, because for so many years that terminology has meant within the city and in lots of areas just low income and very low income. And as I've mentioned a number of times, I really think we need to become an all-inclusive community where we're looking at a program that goes all the way from extremely low income up to moderate and median income levels as well. And that may not fit under the terminology of BMR, and I'm not quite sure how that's most effectively handled, but I think that's your job to figure that out. Anyway, thank you very much for the work you do.
Thank you, Janet.
Thanks, Carrie.
Our next speaker, Jennifer Griffin.
Good evening, Planning Commission. I'm Jennifer Griffin. And I just wanted to answer the question that you all had about why the BMR units are spread across the complexes. As long as I remember there being a BMR program in Cupertino, there has been a push to make sure that the units were equitably spread across the units, the complex. I remember specifically when the Mariani property at Homestead and Sunnyvale, Saratoga was first developed. It became, I think it was called Arioso, and it was rental. They converted it into condos, and at that time the city was able to secure several BMR units. And there was the discussion at that point that all the units were put in one building. And I remember that one of the things that came out of the discussions was that the city felt it was more equitable to have units spread across. Don't just put all the units for BMR like on the back property behind this, where they can't access the swimming pool or in one of the worst locations. Now, I don't think Cupertino would do that, but historically what has happened in places such as San Francisco, developers have built I would say, high-rise development, multi-story, and they would have BMR units for City of San Francisco, but they would historically put them in a separate building and restrict those people from using the amenities of the fancier building, like there were locked doors so that the people in the BMR units could not access the weight rooms, the pool, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that Cupertino was aware of that. And I think in terms of being equitable, that I think it makes more sense to have them spread across the units, because then the children in those units don't feel like they have a stigma on them. I've got BMR on my forehead or something. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think it also keeps a lot of things in Cupertino fair and square. We're not restricting people because they are in BMR units to have to be in an area that's not as fancy as the other sites. Also, the city made sure that materials that were used in the BMR units were equitable to anything else on the property. And I find that very, very good and refreshing. And I hope that that continues. That was a little bit of the historical situation. I think the BMR program is very well done, and I'd like to see more BMR units in the city. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jennifer. Okay, seeing no other comments, we're going to move on to the agenda number 3. Do you guys comments? Oh, sorry. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Lauren. Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Moore.
I think this is part of why, you know, what Jennifer said, why we need to look at the density bonus law, because we are seeing developers go and take the finish, the number of bedrooms and the size of the units as concessions, which are all, you know, things that were built into the BMR program, which are terrific, but
They're going around it.
yeah.
You know, we see it.
So I would just wanted to comment on that as well. You know, part of that, and I think this is, you may see more of it in upcoming projects, because there are, you know, state and federal requirements that override the local standards that we set. If you use low-income housing tax credits, you know, federal funding to build a property, you know, they would not allow financing on a building which was mixed market rate and BMR. So, you know, our policy is differential to that. But, you know, I think there would be value in speaking explicit to that in the next version of the manual, so that it's clear what is okay and what's not. I think that, you know, there was the issue around whether they were dispersed and same finish. Those are things which, again, that's part of the density bonus law that just, you know, if there's a financial justification that this makes the units possible to build, you know, the state's made a judgment call that it's more important to get the units built than it is for them to be the same as the other units. I did want to touch. There was this was an item. You know, revisions to the program were coming back in the summer. Can you talk about the schedule? Will we be hearing that before it comes back for the council update on the manual, or you mentioned there was going to be a new Nexus study and looking at the financials.
Sure. So as of right now, we're finishing up the draft of the economic feasibility study, and it will go to Housing Commission, then Planning Commission, and then City Council as a study session. And we're aiming to bring it to Planning Commission last meeting in July.
Okay.
And then to bring it to City Council in August. And
Yeah.
so now we're on pace for that. So it'll go to Housing Commission first.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think that there's a lot of opportunities. One of the things that we've heard over and over again here has been, you know, that the mitigation manual should speak to extremely low income and to moderate income, as well as to how those ratios and that requirement will be, you know, intermixed with the other requirements. So I think that that's really important. And then I think that there's also, you know, around the discussion of the inclusionary rate. I mean, you know, it's a difficult challenge. It's clear that more units are needed, but if you raise the inclusionary rate too high, then, you know, that has the effect, because this is an incentive. You know, it's an incentive for private funding for this construction. You don't want to cause the project not to get built, and then you have an overall loss of both market rate and BMR units. So, you know, I just wanted to kick that in there, just in case it wasn't coming back before council, but I think, it sounds like we'll have another shot at it.
Yes.
Thanks.
All right, thanks a lot. Any other comments from our commissioners? Okay, we got a lot of people waiting for item number 3. Consider approving a new 185-room, 5-story hotel, 24-hour operations, with underground parking, event meeting rooms, a restaurant with a separate bar, and rooftop lounge with a separate bar at the Cupertino Village Shopping Center. So we'll start with that.
So I just want to clarify prior we do that, there's no consent item on the consent calendar. We also have not received any additional written communications.
Thank you.
With that, we have Eric Serrano here that will be preparing for a presentation for you.
And a reminder, fill out the comment cards if you have anything you need for item number 3. And welcome, Eric.
All right, good evening, Planning Commission. So I will be presenting on the Cupertino Village Hotel. The project, as mentioned, is a new 5-story, 185-room hotel with underground parking, event meeting rooms, a restaurant with a separate bar, and a rooftop bar with a separate bar. So this is the project site. It's circled in that teal color. To the east, you have Apple Park and the Hamptons Apartments. To the south, there's the Hilton Garden Inn. West, you have the Ariaso Apartments, and to the north, you have the Cupertino Village Shopping Center. So the proposal, as I mentioned, is a new hotel, 185 rooms on 1.72 acres. The project was initially analyzed as part of the general plan authorization process. The project is required to obtain a general plan amendment to increase the hotel allocation in the North Falco Park special area in the city's general plan from 0 to 185 hotel rooms. Minus the need for the hotel allocation, the project is consistent with the city's general plan. The use of the hotel is also permitted in the general commercial zone with a use permit as part of the application that the project is seeking. Again, 185 rooms, 1.72 acres. The floor area net is 115,394 square feet, and there are 206 parking spaces separated between the ground and basement levels. So this is the site. Vehicle access is provided off of Prune Ridge, so over here and to the back. There is the entrance to the underground parking here, and then there's a drop-off area here. The project also has a pedestrian entrance here to kind of a lobby area. There's a coffee shop, restaurant to the right here, and there's some outdoor seating as well. In regards to the building setbacks, the building has a roughly 90-foot setback from the rear property line. So here, where 89 feet 3 inches is required. Prune Ridge side, so on this side, it's 8.8 feet 8 inches and a half. Not to get too specific. 11 feet on the right side next to the shopping center, so over here. There is a front setback of 60 feet from here, roughly here to here, which helps maintain the 1-to-1 slope that's required for the building height that's indicated in the general plan. There is a new restaurant with a separate bar on the ground floor, which is in this area here. There's a rooftop bar there's a rooftop lounge with a separate bar in this area here. That's kind of what's drawn out on top. Conference rooms are kind of located on the ground floor around here, and there's some breakout areas for the conference rooms in this area. There's updated landscaping along the perimeter of the property, so the staff has worked really hard with the applicant to kind of to really liven this space, make it very walkable, pedestrian-oriented. So this is the ground floor from North Wolf Road. This is the hotel restaurant on the right. There's a coffee bar kind of idea here. And so the idea is really to bring everybody in from the pedestrian right away and kind of liven up that North Wolf frontage. The city's worked closely with the architect and the applicant's with our consulting architect and the applicant's architect to really liven this space, as I mentioned. And there's conference room breakout areas, like kind of everything pedestrian oriented, everything lively is focused along North Wolf Road to really bring out and make that area very pedestrian oriented. There's proposed street furniture and improvements to help with that as well. This is the view from the back. Again, back here is the vehicle drop off, and then the underground entrance to the parking lot is right there. So landscaping, it's roughly 16,800 square feet throughout the project site. There's improvements along North Wolf Road to include new street furniture, so new bicycle racks, seating areas, benches, trash cans, all that stuff. The project will remove 41 trees throughout the site, but we'll be replacing them. The majority of the trees are kind of in the middle of the site. I don't have that picture, but the trees along North Wolf Road, we worked really closely with the applicant to maintain all these trees here. And there's a good chunk of the redwood trees on site are also being maintained. One thing that we've worked with the applicant, and the applicant is here, it's from Michael Strauss with Kimco Realty, and he'll talk about this as well. There's a proposed driveway between Cupertino Village Hotel and the shopping center. So currently there's a two-way right in and out. Staff has added a condition of approval that would close that driveway. The reason for it is we feel that it would better tie the site together to allow more pedestrian access between the two properties and reduce any potential conflict from vehicles and bicycles and all that. So there's just one less access point for conflict. It's been analyzed with and without the driveway. The CEQA analysis determined really there's no impact one way or the other. It's just the closure of the driveway is more consistent with what the city has felt would make a safer and more lively interaction between the two spaces. In regards to the environmental review, a draft initial study and mitigate negative declaration has been prepared. The MMD identifies mitigation measures in the following areas to reduce potential environmental impacts. So we have air quality, biological resources, cultural and tribal resources, temporary noise levels, and utilities. The mitigations have been included as conditions of approval for the project in the EA resolution. Staff did receive comments during the notice of intent to adopt the MMD and were addressed in the ISMD. We also received additional comments after the 30-day public review and have incorporated those comments into the ISMD. However, even with the minor changes and clarifications to address the comments in the ISMD, the conclusion remained that the project would be less than significant, have a less than significant effect on the environment with the proposed mitigations. The public comments that were received were incorporated into the response to comment memo. The project is also proposing a development agreement to go along with the general plan amendment authorization process. So as part of that agreement, there's a community amenity funding of $1.85 million or $10,000 per room. There's a transportation demand management program that will be required. A transportation management association, should it form, the applicant would be required to be part of that. A shuttle service. So access to the shuttle service available to hotel guests, to people traveling to and from the hotel, that uses the hotel's meeting rooms for functions, and subject to availability for nearby residents, businesses, and the general public traveling between the hotel area and destination. There's reduced rates for official city business, access to the meeting rooms, subject to availability, and internships for local area people. Outreach, site signage 10 days prior to the hearing, excuse me, legal ad placed in the newspaper, notices mailed to property owners within 300 feet of the project site, and posted on the city's official notice bulletin board, and posted on the city's Cupertino's website 1 week prior to the hearing. And so in our recommendation, we recommend that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council to adopt the mitigated negative declaration, approve the general plan amendment, the development permit, the architectural and site approval, tree removal permit, use permit, and development agreement. And that concludes. I'm of course available for any questions. We have the applicant here who has a presentation, and we have Terry McCracken with Placeworks here to answer any environmental questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to mention that the applicant had actually met me in February to present the project. I don't know whether we want to talk about that now or later.
We can do that later.
Okay.
But yeah. So, welcome.
Thank you very much. Greetings to the members of the Cupertino Planning Commission, staff, members of the public. I am Michael Straz. I am the Senior Director of Development for Kimco. I run the large transformational redevelopment projects throughout the Kimco portfolio up and down the West Coast. I also wanted to mention that like the city's consultants who are here to answer questions, we have a number of consultants that are here in the event that there are questions as well. We have representatives from our architecture firm Hornberger and Worstel, from our landscape architecture firm Cliff Lowe and Associates, and we have our land use attorney Christina Lawson from Hanson Bridget as well. Wanted to just walk you through some of the high points in the project. Staff did a great job per usual in hitting some of the high points in the project, but I wanted to put our own take on it. A little bit of history. Our company has owned the Cupertino Village Shopping Center for quite some time, since 2005, which doesn't sound that long ago, but when you do the math, the years tend to add up a little bit. We've been improving this shopping center for some time as well. We not too long ago, in the last 3 or 4 years, added the 240 parking stall parking garage in the rear of the shopping center, and we recently, within the last 24 months, added 2 new shop buildings, which are doing great, and we think they're great additions to the shopping center. We also recently completed or are just wrapping up some courtyard revisions, which have tried to dress up the outdoor areas, and we're just thrilled with the results as well. As staff mentioned, this project is proposing to add 185 hotel room upper upscale boutique hotel. In terms of what is an upper upscale boutique hotel, think of it as the highest. It'll be the nicest hotel in Cupertino. It's full service. It'll be with the 3-meal restaurant and the like. So it's nicer than anything, or a higher quality level, I should say, than anything that's currently open and operating in the city. We received a green light, 5-0, from the City Council on August 1st of 2017 as part of the second cycle GPA hearing that year, and we made our formal submittal in December of 2017. Time flies when you're having fun. I won't hit too much detail on this slide. I think that most people would tend to agree that Cupertino needs more hotel rooms. The visitors to Cupertino are coming. They're coming whether they're in this hotel is ultimately approved and constructed or not. The only question that we see is whether the people coming to Cupertino will have the opportunity to stay in Cupertino, or whether they will be on the roads coming to Cupertino by their generally personal occupancy vehicles. Our hotel site, the site is at least in our idea, very, very well suited towards a hotel. For a couple of reasons. The hotels tend to run in packs, and with the Hilton Garden Inn and the Courtyard by Marriott right next door, this would be fit nicely in line with the existing hotels. We love the adjacency to Apple Park. We expect that many of our guests may have come to Cupertino for business across the street, and they can walk across the street, borrow a bike through a bike share that we anticipate having in the hotel. If they would like some libation and perhaps a snack or a full meal, we've got a number of restaurants in our 125,000 square foot shopping center right next door, with lots of tenants who would be happy to accommodate those guests. So for that, and the adjacency to the freeway also keeps what little traffic is coming to the hotel. It keeps them off most of the city streets as well. So we can dig into that as much as you like during the questions, but we think that the site is fairly ideal for a hotel. In terms of the facts, we talked about the 185 rooms, the 206 parking stalls, which I would add is significantly more than the parking study performed by the city determined would be required. So we are intentionally over parking in order to alleviate a perception at times that has been in the community that we don't have enough parking spaces. Lots of people love to come to all the great restaurants and shops, and we're thrilled about that. So we're adding extra parking spaces just to make doubly and triply sure that they'll have a place to go. I would also note that the restaurant was discussed. We also do plan a bar and rooftop lounge, which we think will be great and well managed. We also have a gated and screened loading area with trash on the north side facing the shopping center in case questions about how we're actually going to service and operate the hotel come up. And we also did want to make the point that 100% of our North Wolf frontage is planned to be activated by the conference spaces and breakout areas that staff identified in the staff report. The coffee and market area spilling out into the urban plaza along North Wolf, and the restaurant with outdoor seating. So we've really worked a lot with staff to try to activate as much of the frontage as possible, and we think that the 100% that we think has achieved will certainly be a good addition to the North Wolf corridor and bring some life to it. The staff made the point, but I want to make the point again as well. The only reason that we had to go through the GPA process, and the only reason that a general plan amendment is part of the request for this project, is because of there are no hotel rooms left in the citywide development allocation from the general plan. That our project conforms to the zoning ordinance, to the general plan. There's no exceptions for heights, for setbacks, densities, or any other standards. We're staying under the 60-foot height limit, and I think we've gone through great lengths to make sure that we're coloring inside the lines. We wanted to make this project as simple and as within the existing rules of the general plan as possible, and I think we've achieved that. Just a few more comments about the community impacts. Hotels don't generally have any negative impacts on schools, which we know is a hot button issue in this community, and rightly so. The traffic impact is minimal, as you would expect from a hotel in this location, which is confirmed by the city's traffic study, and the accessibility to Apple Park and to the shopping center and all the additional TDM measures that are required will further reduce any impacts. I should also make the point that this project is anticipated to generate significant transient occupancy tax revenues to the city. The city's economic study that was performed at the time of the GPA in 2017 pegged the range of about $1.2 to $1.8 million a year. We, of course, think that this hotel will be fabulously successful, and we could see that number appearing very conservative in the rearview mirror. We also wanted to make the point that there's no displacement from this proposed project. Typically, when we talk about displacement, we're talking about residents. Sometimes in our businesses can be displaced too, and we wanted to make the point that we do have a signed lease with the Duke of Edinburgh Edinboro to move to a vacant space just behind there in the retail B building that's very close to their current location. So no businesses will be displaced by this proposed project as well. And we think the continuity of that particular tenant is a great asset to the center, and hope they stay very, very long time in the city. In terms of the voluntary amenities, staff mentioned many of these as well, so I won't go into it other than to say that we took great pains as part of the GPA process to put together a package that we thought would really balance out and really distinguish our proposed project. So we think that it's a very compelling set of benefits for the community. We also have taken our outreach responsibilities very, very seriously. We've reached out to all of our neighbors. We've had numerous meetings with our good friends across the street at Apple Park and made significant changes to the design in order to assure our friends across the street that we would be good neighbors and respect the privacy of Apple Park. We've hosted a mixer with the chamber. We've gone to many chamber meetings and have really done significant outreach to the business community, and we have made great strides to being visible members of the community. For example, we purposely kept our notice signage up from the 2017 GPA process, just so that nobody driving by the site would have any illusions as to what was happening on that site, and making sure that people were aware of our project. I did want to also touch upon the issue of the access point that Mr. Serrano mentioned. I just wanted to be specific. I was actually really proud of how I put this graphic together all by myself. But in between where is currently the Duke of Edinboro and the Key Point Credit Union space, between the Retail A building and the proposed hotel, that's the driveway that we are talking about. Right now, that driveway is available for right-ins and right-outs, but the right-out is difficult because it's a light that it seems like you wait for quite a long time to get out of there. So this is the driveway that we're talking about. We have proposed to retain the driveway, but in order to as a compromise proposal to staff, we suggested that it be retained only for rights in, no out movements as well. We know that one of staff's concerns about the driveway was to try to minimize the possibility of any illegal lefts in for people going northbound on North Wolf Road. We know that staff is concerned about illegal lefts. We have heard that some of those illegal lefts happen now. Our suspicion is that a lot of those are probably for U-turns rather than necessarily to go into the shopping center, because we keep track of our counts coming into the shopping center. It's not a very well-used driveway, but we think it's critically important to retain it. We think it's important to retain the right-in movement here to support the retail tenants in this part of the shopping center. To maximize customer convenience, and to keep the straight route from this driveway all the way to the rear parking garage. One of the challenges with managing this shopping center is parking, as I mentioned before. A lot of times, if people can't find spaces, there are plenty of stalls that are available on the second level of the parking structure. This is the cleanest and clearest route to get people back to the shopping center. So our concern is that were this to go away, it would be more difficult, and the utilization would be even more challenging. As staff mentioned, it's not there's no queuing issue, which would have been the paramount safety concern. If there would be so much traffic that people would be queued up waiting, and it could create a challenge on North Wolf Road coming southbound. That's the staff's traffic engineer looked at that. Nobody's projecting that. So it really comes down to a judgment call and the city's preference, which we understand, have great respect for staff, but we respectfully would request that this commission consider allowing us just to retain that right in movement. There are no conflicts with Apple Parkway, and we think it's an important element to keep in the project. We all love pretty pictures, so we added some pretty pictures at the end of this. We are thrilled with how the project looks. We think that our design team did a fabulous job in putting this together, and we are certainly happy to answer any questions that the commission may have. So thank you so much, and we're here to answer any questions at all.
All right. Hey, thank you for coming. Any questions from the commissioners? And any other comments from staff? Okay.
We'll be here all night, so to speak.
Let's hope not. Just kidding. Yeah, we talk first, and then we open up for comments. Okay, well, I'm going to start, since I'm going to start by making a few comments, and we've got comment cards as well, which when we get to the public portion. So I'm in general favor of a hotel, and I think with Cupertino Village, people drive up to an hour to get to Cupertino Village. I remember doing that when I lived in Emeryville, and I lived in other parts of the city. People do drive down there. I am for the $1.7 million in positive impact to the general fund. I think that's a very important feature. We have developers that have been working against us and taking away our retail for some time, and I think this is something useful. I also think that the upside on the impact on the gain for retail for your existing retail tenants was not calculated in there. So there is upside there as well as they populate that, not during a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but during the Sunday through Thursday portion, which seems to be a little bit more empty than on the weekends, which gives you that parking perception problem. My only challenges are really with the developer agreement portion, right? And for me, I've been looking at all these developer agreements across the board, and I'm just going to open that up for conversation, but I do want to know how long you think it would take. Let's say it was approved sometime this summer from beginning to end to build, because I have a question about the effective date, right? I think 5 years is a long time to get to retail tax revenue, but okay, I'm just curious on that one. And the second piece is 3.9 on the developer agreement, which is really the initiative or referendum exclusion if something had changed within the city, because I have a strong belief in initiatives and referendums in the city, and I don't want it to take away citizens' rights should something happen. So those are mainly my main concerns about that. And then regarding your access point on the last piece, for me, I may disagree with staff. I'm kind of tired on the war on the automobile that's been going on. I do believe in walkable cities and being able to walk around, but I'm your like 5 person a week that uses that to get the mod pizza in and out on a left and a right. So I just want to be that. And we've been cutting out all these ways. I'm glad nobody uses it because it's the only way to get out of there fast, right? Because that light is slow on both ends. And I know it was designed that way for traffic calming, but you can't get out fast. And that egress to me is pretty important, but I'll just leave it at that. So I'll see what other commissioners have on environmental impact and some of the other pieces that are here.
Actually, I'd like to hear more about the staff's view on why they prefer to shut it off versus what the petitioner is requesting.
I'm going to pull up a slide that gives a more site plan. So one of the big things that we've talked about is really activating that frontage along North Wolf Road. That's one of the big things that we focus on, and I think this project has done really well. We worked very closely with the applicant to do that. And kind of as Chair Wang mentioned, there is that connection between the shopping center and the hotel that's going to exist. So we do see the hotel guests going to Cupertino Village Shopping Center and back and forth. We do see that happening. And so there's a potential conflict there that could occur. Granted, people look both ways before you cross the street. Makes it a lot easier. But that's one of the things that we see. We also see this as a different type of improvement that could occur. We see that being more tying the two sites together. So different types of improvement, more street furniture, different types of landscape treatments to kind of tie the site together more cohesively. Now, it's been general practice and general plan policy that where we have excessive curb cuts or the potential to have any reduced conflict, we go for those. And so in this instance, that's where staff is coming from, is to reduce that potential conflict. Again, there's nothing that is wrong with this intersection. It can live the way it does, but we think that in order to provide a better pedestrian and frontage and synergy between the two sites, and as the applicant mentioned, they do anticipate a lot of their guests occurring from people across the street. And so providing that walkability for them, I think, is very important for the site.
So if we are going to shut it off, you expect some more pedestrian area there or some seating there, or?
Yeah, the way we ran the condition, essentially we'll work with the applicant to modify that. We didn't get too much into the weeds with it because this is one of those things we agree to disagree. And that's why the applicant brought it up, and we brought it up because we wanted to allow for Planning Commission and to council to make that decision. So we do see this working together with the applicant as we've had throughout this process to really create something that's fantastic and goes together with the two sites.
Suppose we shut it off. How will Ray get to his pizza store?
So he would probably take Prune Ridge and make a left on Prune Ridge. I'm not sure which way you come right now. Do you come off of
I go Wolf left.
Wolf? Okay.
I Wolf up north Wolf, make a left.
Come around?
I try both.
I mean,
I'm your left
I
turn
think there's no left into that intersection right now. It's an illegal left. So right now he would have, not saying anything, but
Hypothetically, I go
That's
left.
that one that got counted. He's the guy who got
That's your one kind of going the wrong direction.
but it would be along Homestead.
Yeah. I come in through the Apple one, that Apple.
Yeah, exactly. So Wolf, you turn at Homestead, and then there's a right in front of Mod Pizza. So that'd be one of two ways.
If you on the homestead, so the entry would be from the homestead side, or not
Yes.
anything on Wolf at all.
Yeah, let me.
Let's go back.
go to
There's
that.
two turn-ins that are farther north on Wolf.
Yeah, so the Wolf is up here, the light, and so they would come down here and make a left into Mod's right there. But the other way would be to make the left on Prune Ridge, go down here, and then park in this area, that nice parking structure that Michael has said no one uses. Very,
Old habits die hard.
I know. I always look for surface parking when I'm there.
Yeah, but you have two entrances, right? You got one here and you got one here. Right?
Yeah, there's, and correct me if I'm wrong, Michael.
There's another one that's north of that as
North
well.
of that, yes.
And it's by the Starbucks. That's
Yeah,
right
right.
outside.
Yes.
It's on the other one.
So there's three for the shopping center specifically, and then the public right away for Prune Ridge Avenue.
I will also add, Commissioner, to that point, it also serves as a gathering place right now. If you frequent that center as much as I have, you notice that there's a small spot right outside of what is that boba place called? Happy Lemon, right? There's a little space right there, and you see a lot of folks hanging out there. So we envision this as an additional gathering space.
Could you mark it?
I think Happy Lemon's right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's over there.
So, and that's one point. And the second point I want to say that even though the city staff does disagree with the applicant on this particular point, it's been a very collaborative process, and it hasn't really created any issues with the relationship. And they've been extremely patient and easy to work with. So,
Commissioner Moore. Good.
I would like to hear about the negotiations that went on with Apple regarding privacy.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Moore. And then afterwards, I wonder if would it be inappropriate for me to respond to some of the other questions that have come up so far? Or
Please
should
do.
we wait
That'd be
until the
great.
end?
Oh,
Okay,
please do.
great. Well, we worked very collaboratively with representatives from Apple across the street. They were concerned about prying eyes from the shopping center. So we agreed to keep the row of ash trees on the outside of the sidewalk, which are currently between 70 and 80 plus feet tall. So the site is currently screened by ash trees and by some very, very tall redwoods as well. Our original plan was to remove those trees our friends at Apple convinced us that that they should be retained as long as they possibly could to give the trees at Apple Park time to grow up nice and big and tall, and also to let our trees that are behind that row of trees further screen any prying eyes that might decide to come to the hotel. We also added what's called fritted glass, which is a pattern on the glass. It's not a sticker. It's inside the glass, which could impair the ability for photography should somebody come up there. I also wanted to make the point that Apple Park, the building, I don't want to refer to it as a spaceship, but that the actual building is, I believe it's over 900 feet from our building. So it's not like we're very close. But we wanted to respect the privacy, and it was a concern of those across the street. So those are some of the high points that involved the discussions with them. It was, again, very collaborative. We wanted to be good neighbors, and we believe that we've mitigated their concerns.
Thank you. I did want to add, with regards to the fritting, I did tour the Facebook headquarters, I believe it is, in Menlo Park, and they, to be bird friendly, they put the fritting on the glass, and they did have a comment that when they did striped bands, they actually did better for making it bird safe. But the fritting also should help with making that bird safe in that area, especially with Apple Park being 176 acres now of almost mature trees all over it.
Right.
Yeah.
We concur. And then I also wanted to address some of Commissioner Wong's concerns as well. Let's see, how long to build? The construction period will be every bit of 24 to call it 30 months. It's always amazing how long these things take to build, especially because our parking is subterranean. We have to go down before we can come up.
And get the footings.
So it does take quite some time. It also, on top of that, or rather before that, it'll take a good year for the drawing process from when we release our design team. So we're already talking about call it 3.5 years from when we're full throttle until we open. So. We certainly understand the concern. I know that there are other projects that have with approvals that have stood open and unexercised for some time, and we're certainly cognizant of that. As part of that, we know that for our project, the city went down from prior projects and prior approvals for 10 years and came down to 5. So the 5 is already a reduction from what our understanding is that others may have been done.
Yeah, no, it's normally been 10. We've been dropping it down. That's why.
Right, and then we certainly understand the concern, but we would respectfully request that the term of the development agreement and the ability that this approval that we be allowed to keep it for as long as the commission and the council would feel comfortable. We think 5 years is a good reasonable number, just to in case there are market fluctuations and the like. But we certainly understand the commission's and the council's preference that if we were fortunate enough to win or to gain an approval, we understand that the expectation would be that we would proceed with that very short order.
And is financing secure?
I'm sorry?
Is financing secured already for this?
Well, the good news is that we are a REIT. And we do not, as a typical matter, finance projects individually, because the REIT law, we have to reinvest our funds. So the simple answer to your question is yes.
Yep. Okay.
I also wanted to address some of the discussion about the access point. I totally concur with the acting director's characterization of the discussions being very collaborative. There's as Mr. Serrano said, that we agreed to disagree. I would point out that if somebody is going south on North Wolf and they wouldn't you know it, they missed the entrance at Mod Pizza. Were this to be closed, that would require a customer coming to either the hotel or to one of our retail tenants or somebody who's thirsty and just wants some boba tea. You'd have to go all the way down to Prune Ridge. You'd turn right on Prune Ridge. You'd turn right on the driveway, and then literally a quarter of a mile later, you would have to navigate your way into the shopping center. So whereas yes, there are other options for somebody that's asking our customers to make a lot of turns, and that's asking a lot. And so our concern would be that they would just continuing, or just say, forget it, I will go to another shopping center. I'll go to Falco, I'll go to Main Street, Cupertino, wherever that is. And whereas that's still fine for the city of Cupertino. We obviously, we're a retail owner, and we want to keep our tenants as healthy and vibrant and as members of the community as long as possible. Regarding the connection, we currently have 3 crosswalks. I think at least 2 of those are raised crosswalks. A raised crosswalk, think of a big speed bump with a crosswalk on top of it, which is already traffic calming and further connects. They're ligaments that essentially connect the shopping center to the hotel property. So we've taken great pains to try to put those two together. Certainly understand the goal, but we think that keeping just the right in to allow those southbound folks who may have missed Mod Pizza or who want to go straight to the parking garage. I would also comment that it's sometimes the upper level that is undersubscribed. We do get a fairly high utilization on the lower level, but just to keep that, we're trying to make things easy for our customers and easy for the citizens that come to us. That's what I have so far.
So I actually have a question for the city and
Of course.
you. So when we are going south, we have one entrance near Homestead, one near Mott Pizza, and that's okay. Other power?
Yeah, it's powerful.
Thanks.
You need it.
So I'm just looking at the Google map here, so that's right. So we have one entrance near Homestead, one near Mott Pizza, and this is the third one, right? Is that correct?
Coming southbound.
Coming southbound.
So I'll kind of mark
Coming
it from-
southbound from Prune Ridge.
There's one here, here, and here.
From Homestead.
So there's one off the map, off the aerial,
Yeah.
off of Homestead up here.
Near the Starbucks.
Oh.
And if you're going north, then you basically have to take a U-turn and come back
Yes,
because there's no left turn allowed.
correct.
there.
You'd have
No
to-
legal left turn that I know of.
Yeah, you have to make a left at Prune Ridge.
Prune Ridge.
That's the only one you can
Over
do.
here, and then there's a back road that goes here that accesses the site.
I do have a question. When you mentioned there's a level 5 type of hotel, just for the public, what does that
Yes.
mean? Just give some brands, not brands you're working with, just in general.
Well, most of the top brands have a level that's even with that, or that's at that level. For example,
So on a Marriott chain versus a Hilton chain versus a Hyatt.
if it were a Marriott, it would probably be the Marriott Autograph Collection. If it were a Hyatt, it could be a Thompson. That's a new
Andaz.
brand that they just bought. It could be a let's see. It's a full service, boutique sort of hotel. So it's definitely a premium name. I guess Kimpton is probably kind of the level of quality that would be, just as an example. If in case you're curious, we have not identified the ultimate flag, but you may hear some of the same names bantied about as the sort of operators that you would expect for this project. And I would say that the development agreement does go into creates assurances that
It was a level 5 premium hotel.
right, that you get the level of quality that you're voting on and that the council will vote on as well. I did pull. I don't know if
I
if we
think
can go
Commissioner Moore
back
has
to
something to
mine,
add. So.
I do have a plan, so I can show you the entrances. Okay. wonder if I have to unplug it and plug it in again. Otherwise, I will defer again to staff's map. But there are, this is embarrassing. All right, here we go. So there is one entrance that is next to that is next. This is for southbound North Wolf automobiles. There is one entrance that is right next to Starbucks. The next entrance off of North Wolf is at Mod Pizza, right? And then there's the entrance in the access point in question. So were this to go away, there would only be two access points to the shopping center from North Wolf, and other customers, were they to want to get to us, would have to again take a right on Prune Ridge, take a right, and then navigate their way once they've gone a quarter of a mile out of their way into the guts of the shopping center, which we're happy to have them do, but we want to try to keep it as convenient as possible, of course.
Got it. We're just figuring how Commissioner Fung got a green O out of that, but that's okay.
There's also the one entrance off of Homestead over here as well. Just
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. May I,
Actually, the green one is Homestead. That one is, yeah, no, that's right.
Okay, so I'm looking at your parcel map, and it looks like this driveway that you're describing is not on your property. So what kind of agreement, what instrument is going to be recorded for this?
Well, I appreciate you pointing that out. Our company owns the entire shopping center and this parcel as well. So you're right; they are different parcels. I don't remember if there's a lot tie agreement that's required, but whatever we need to do to satisfy that concern, we're happy to do. We could also just do a lot line adjustment that moves the property to include certain areas, but there's no intention to sell these properties, and we would be open to a condition of approval that would require some sort of a tie agreement for requiring cooperation were that to happen at some point in the future.
I believe the general plan for the mixed-use urban villages encouraged parcel assembly, and I'm kind of wondering why that hasn't occurred at this location.
not something that we've looked at this site. This site, I don't think, has always been owned by the same owners. I think there's been different owners at different times. Not something that we looked at for this particular site. Just no reason in particular why we haven't looked at that.
I'm actually a bit confused because when I look at Google Maps, I don't see a connection between Wolf and Prune Ridge. Is that something we're going to put in the later?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
It's already here. This is the entrance at the intersection.
Yeah.
That's the stoplight.
Okay, so
There's a stoplight there.
Right.
So it's the only traffic light in.
Right, with the full movement.
Yeah, and just crosswalks and all the other stuff.
so this is on north of the Hilton Garden Inn.
Yeah.
It's that abandoned bank place with the Duke Edinburgh on the
Well,
side.
I'd hardly refer to it as an abandoned bank. It's a building that we look forward to removing to make way for an exciting
A wonderful
hotel
hotel and a new
Right.
development. So.
And I would point out that building was cleared for
Right.
this redevelopment project. So
Any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner
Go ahead.
Fung?
Yeah, interestingly, I have very few questions. I'm curious, so there are not extended stay units in this hotel, is that correct?
no, and I think that it was the development agreement that requires stays shorter than 29 days,
29
something
days
like that. Yeah.
for transit occupancy tax
I mean,
purposes.
I think that's even the case in some of the ones which would be, that have a kitchenette.
Yeah, it's a standard condition, but
TOT,
we
yeah.
just have an extra instrument to ensure conformity.
And to ensure that the stays are eligible for a TOT tax.
Yes, that's
Correct.
correct.
We need TOT. That's right.
Yeah, the interesting thing, I noticed, I was surprised to see there was a great majority of king bed rooms So it's just an interesting observation. I was curious about that.
Right, and all of that will ultimately be decided by the flag once we've identified the flag. But the idea is that this would be we'd love for people to stay on the weekends as well. But the concept behind this is that this will be for business visitors and business guests. But we look forward to working with the ultimate operator to fine tune that mix.
Fix the Chinese restaurant problem, and you get a banquet facility, and you'll have people in there.
Well, we do anticipate having an active special occasion and banquet business through the conference spaces. We paid great care to make sure that this would operate well, because we do anticipate a lot of banquets and some really great events.
Yeah, no, the 5,500 square feet gives you about 400 seats, 40 tables.
Yeah, we've done the math, and that's about as much as we could comfortably accommodate given the size of the site. But we appreciate the comment.
Commissioner Moore.
Could we go over from the developer agreement, 5.1.5, the meeting rooms, and let's just talk about what that would be, and then the reduced rates, 5.1.6, and then the internships. What are those three items?
Sure. Well, let me start with the internships, because that's all I remember right this second. The idea here was that with De Anza College and with all the wonderful high schools and other schools in the vicinity, what if we had put together a program to encourage people to consider going into the hospitality business. So the idea was as an amenity, both for De Anza and the other colleges and at various levels, and also we love the idea of people looking at this hotel as more than just a place to stay. The details, the specific details, haven't totally been worked out, but I know that there's a requirement in the development agreement that as we put this program together, it will require us to collaborate and to obtain the city's approval. We're thrilled about that. That's going to be one of the fun parts of what we're planning to do. In terms of the reduced rates for the official city guests, that was, again, we were looking for ways to thank the community and thank the city for being our neighbors, and we thought that would be a great way to encourage dignitaries and the like to come to the city. So I think that the agreement or the framework that we came up with was that that official city guests would receive a rate at, I think, is 10% lower than the otherwise lowest rate, whether it was advertised or something. But the idea is to try to put a nice deal together for important city guests. And then for the meeting rooms, the idea was that for whether it's I don't remember exactly what we ended up with, whether it was for not-for-profits or for school district and things like that, that to make our facilities available, we want them to be used, and in order to have people coming in and out and think of our hotel as part of the community, that's an offer that we were really pleased to make. Again, all these programs, the details still need to be fleshed out, but we look forward to working with city staff to figure out how everything will actually work.
Commissioner Moore.
Well, how does this work, if we were to agree with the developer agreement and then have items that are still under negotiation afterwards? How, do you understand, how is that going to change? Like, when I'm looking at the reduced rates, I don't see an upper limit for that. And for the meeting rooms, it's not clear, what size meeting rooms are being offered. And also for the internships, it's not detailed.
I defer to staff, but I would just point out that those details wouldn't typically, or I wouldn't think would be all in a development agreement. The development agreement puts the framework together, and then I think that it just sets the boundaries, and you're right that some of the detail hasn't been thought through, but that wouldn't typically, I mean, happen. We're 4 years from the hotel opening, so it would be hard to flesh out every detail. We certainly understand the point, and there's an expectation that we will work in good faith, and I think that the development agreement has the teeth to make sure that we do.
Because I wouldn't want to see us end up with a 200 square foot meeting room at the end of the time period, and after hearing
Right.
about this 5,000 square foot space.
Right, and it's multiple spaces, and it's conceptually detailed, and we could. I'm sure that when the planning will have to review for substantial conformance when we go in for our building permit. So I would imagine that staff would certainly be able to make sure that we all agree that we're living up to our obligations from our approval and from the development agreement at that point too. But if I probably shouldn't be talking about this, staff can probably address.
We still have
that
another
better.
shot at it. So it's-
No, so one of the things we do, like Michael said, there's certain things that we don't get too much detail in, and we work with the applicant to make sure meeting rooms, we have that in a lot of our hotels where we have access, and all the hotel operators have been very welcoming. They're like, hey, can we use this room? They're like, yep, here you go. Just call this person, set the date. So it's been very pleasant.
And 14-day prior, I think, was in that DA.
We've done it where we need a week, and they've been very accommodating. The room's available, so they'll give it to us. But we also have a provision in all DAs where we have an annual review. So one of the things we have is all actions pursuant to the terms of this agreement with respect to the development of the project every 12 months to determine good faith compliance with this agreement. So we have that requirement to go over and over every year, that these ongoing obligations, the meeting rooms, the shuttle service, the TDM program, all that stuff is being done annually. And if it's not being done, we have teeth to go back and for lack of a better term, to go after them.
So this is done at staff level?
It's a form that's done by the applicant. It's in the DA packet. It's an annual review form. It's given to us. Staff reviews it, and I believe it's signed by either the director or the city manager to confirm compliance with all the requirements of the development agreement.
Yeah, I think one concern I have is about lack of specificity. I think so. For the shuttle service, we've listed like 3 options, but is there some form of a minimum service requirement, or like, will it be like 2 shuttles or 1 shuttle, or like, do we have any guidelines like those at all?
I'm sorry to interrupt. I wonder if the commission would indulge us to allow Christina Lawson from Hanson Bridget, our land use attorney, who negotiated the development agreement on our behalf, comment on some of these items.
Yeah, it'd be great. Please come on up. And I do have a question for staff in between as well, so you can prep this. Do we even have a TDM program working right now with the hotels? That's theoretical at the moment, right?
TDM we can have for a per project basis. The TMA is probably what you're referring to, which is the Transportation Management Association. I think we're working on that.
Okay, that's not up yet.
Correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure that everyone's clear on that.
Good evening, Christina Lawson with Hanson Bridget on behalf of Kimco. I just wanted to call your attention to section 5.4 of the development agreement. That section requires that, so development agreements don't continue in perpetuity for the life of the project, for example, meaning the life of the hotel once it's constructed. Development agreements have a fixed term. Yeah. In this case, it's 5 years, potential extensions, but it's really 5 years. It's intended as a mechanism to facilitate the development and sort of describe what the terms are and the vesting protections also afforded to the hotel. In order to secure these obligations on a perpetual basis, there are what the development agreement refers to as public benefit covenants that are required to be negotiated and then recorded against the property. It's anticipated from Kimco's perspective that those will be negotiated, sort of immediately prior to building permits being issued. Likely the flag's going to be identified. We're going to have sort of the operational details of the hotel, and that's the best place for all of this specificity as to precisely who needs to be interacting with whom, the specific number of internships, that sort of thing. We really did intentionally leave some flexibility, both for the city, the project's 4 years away, as you've heard, and also for the future hotel operator to be able to sort of negotiate and implement these conditions. But that's the mechanism by which there will be something that's recorded formally against the property that secures the city's rights to those benefits.
With regards to Section 3.9 on the initiative
Yes.
and referenda, is there any way to revisit that in a way? What is your concern and why is that placed in
Well,
there?
so that's actually a standard development
Boilerplate,
agreement
yep.
term across all development agreements really in the state of California, because development agreements are intended to provide vesting protections to the developer for the term of the development. And to the extent an initiative was allowed to come in and interrupt or sort of displace the approval, we would no longer have those vesting protections. So, I mean, that's the purpose of that provision. It's not to limit the public's right, but development agreements are intended to vest development approvals for the fixed period of time. And, you know, I defer to your city attorney as well on that point, but.
Okay.
I think it's probably useful to also comment that term actually refers to a referendum or initiative that would affect, it's not directed specifically at this development agreement, but something, you know, citywide, you know, were that to change some, you know, the amount of pervious, you know, pavement you would have.
Right.
That's what it's protecting you against. So that's vesting the right to maintain
Right.
that at
And I mean,
level of
and
approval.
if you take a look at the terms of the development agreement, I mean, we start making payments to the city pretty immediately, right? And in exchange for us doing some of those things, making those payments before we have our, you know, permits and before the hotel is operational. I guess the benefit of the bargain there is that we have some protection that we'll be able to actually build the hotel when we pull the building permits.
Okay.
Thanks. Oh, sorry.
Hold on. The site's currently zoned commercial and residential, and so it would need to be rezoned to include the hotel, or not?
The hotel is a conditional use under the CG zone.
Conditional use.
So
Okay.
one of the applications is a hotel for 24-hour use with the separate bar for the restaurant.
Okay, but if it is right across the street from Apple, and we have had a lot of people coming to the city and complain about the fact that we are not providing enough housing, and when I calculate residential on this site, I can end up using a density bonus with about 57 units. So I just want to make that point, and you know, even on the previous project that we approved, that one could have had 75 residential units. So I have to say it is disappointing that we've got residential designations and that we're letting them go.
I do have a question for city staff on this question, kind of related to what Commissioner Moore is saying. In the event where you end up with, and not saying that this is where your level 5 is, but you have something like a Ritz-Carlton residences in there, how does that designation show up for housing versus versus hotel? Where you have condo units and housing together.
So you're asking so the hotel would only be a hotel use. There's always a limitation on the stays.
It is, but there are certain designations where you have both, where you have a hotel and residences at the same time.
Right, but they're...
Not for this specific
not
designation.
for this-
This is hypothetical,
Oh,
not for this
sorry.
one. Just curious. Yes, I know you've been working on this for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, like, how would that work?
It would be a different mechanism of approval. We'd have to separate the two uses into the hotel and to the residential component and look at the decision kind of...
Because
findings
what I'm
from-
thinking out loud here is really that in the future, those type of hotel projects could also have some residentials.
Theoretically, like Commissioner Moore mentioned, a mixed-use site can do a lot of different things. It's just really up to...
And that is a mixed-use zoning for most of Kimco's properties, the ones that are all connected.
Most of our commercial zones do have that commercial residential to it.
But I would actually point out that under the current terms, this is something we discussed in our kind of goal setting. Under the current terms, they would not actually be able to build housing there because it doesn't have a housing element
Correct.
designation.
Mm-hmm.
So it would require a general plan amendment for that. I think that's actually a failing in the general plan as we've done it, but that is the case.
And no residences are proposed here. This is a
Correct.
straight
Correct.
hotel.
Yeah, and I'd say it's a failing, but it's also a control mechanism as well. So I think it works both ways. So, okay, any more? Oh, one more.
So I would like to mention a few things about the mitigated negative declaration. I was one of the late comment letter writers.
Page 174, actually.
Yeah, so I'm going to put it on the overhead.
Your microphone.
The Environmental Review Committee met on December 13th, and they looked over the draft mitigated negative declaration, and then the ERC hasn't had a meeting since December 13th, so they couldn't approve the meeting minutes. So I was originally told that this meeting was going to be scheduled a few months earlier. So I was looking for the meeting minutes and could not locate them because there hadn't been any mechanism for them to be approved, and I wanted to know what had happened at the that particular ERC meeting and couldn't find it out. So the next thing I did was go pull up the MND to read it myself, and then went to look at GeoTracker and Envirostore to see if the site was listed. And in it, as you can see in my email, that I found that the APN for the hotel was listed. And I couldn't find the Phase 1 ESA for the site, which I think should have been included with the MND. It was referenced, but it wasn't there. So that is why I wrote the city about this, and I'll talk a little bit more in a second. Essentially, what the problem is that there is an open site, the Cupertino Village Dry Cleaners, which Northgate has been working on, Northgate Environmental Management Incorporated, and they appear to also have worked on the mitigated negative declaration. So when they did extra soil testing after I had written my email, their soil testing went 3 feet below grade surface. And when I was looking at the Cupertino Village cleaners, it looked like they were going between 6 and 22 feet. And looking at the cross-section for the hotel, because it's a subterranean garage, you've got about 22 feet of excavation happening. And it's around 8,000 truck haul trips. So I was wondering if somebody could comment on why the soil testing was done at such a shallow level. When looking over at the dry cleaners, they look like they went much deeper, and it was the same company.
Well, I commend you on getting into the details of the report. The testing that we did recently was specifically to address the pesticides in the shallow soils. So it was a focused phase 2 investigation. The dry cleaner, there is an active dry cleaner case, but that is on the far side of the site. The dry cleaner issues, I'm hardly an expert when it comes to them, but I know that they tend to be very, very localized, and I don't think there's any evidence that shows any migration of the dry cleaner issue in the direction of the hotel site. We did perform a phase 1 analysis that was submitted as part of our December of 2017 formal proposal, and that phase 1 did not indicate any known environmental issues. I don't remember the technical term. So staff does have a full phase 1 that addressed it. But you're right that both activities are happening, in the same vicinity, but it's on the other side of the shopping center, and I'm not aware of any evidence where the environmental, whether Northgate or anyone else has concluded that. I'm not sure if the MND got into any review of that. Perhaps Ms. McCracken from PlaceWorks might comment on that.
I have Terry McCracken from PlaceWorks.
see. I'm Terry McCracken from PlaceWorks, and all of the responses that you received are actually accurate. The village cleaners is, it shows up on the EnviroStore because EnviroStore is recognizing like a 12.5 acre area, and so it's representing a very broad area, but our particular site is not recognized as part of having that condition. And I think we tried to do we did do some updates to the initial study to try to reflect that, to be a little bit more clear about the discrepancy, why you can look it up in one way and not see the difference that it is on a larger site. The phase 1 was added to the final initial study in the appendices, but we didn't include all the technical reports. They were available, and this is recognized in the initial study, and I do recognize it's an oversight. It was inconvenient to have to go to the city, the Community Development Department to request one of the reports, but that was recognized in the initial study that you could find the phase 1 that way. But the phase 1 they only recognized as a recommended soil sample was the shallow soils.
Any other questions for Ms. McCracken while she's up there?
I have a question for the city staff. In general, when we are digging, say, for a subterranean garage or anything which is below grade, what kind of environmental permissions or approvals do we typically need?
So there's different air quality management practices and water. I think water board gets into it if there's some drainage issues. So that's part of it, but the big thing is that it goes through our building permit process. And so through that process, we review all these different requirements. There's essentially like a checklist. I don't know off the top of my head all the different things that we look at, but it's like going to BACMID to make sure that we're using the right equipment, that there's nothing. They get a sign off on the building material, that kind of stuff. So there's different mechanisms built in through our permitting process and as mitigation measures to make sure that the environmental effects of the construction are mitigated.
Thank you.
So the report would have actually shown the specific location where the dry cleaner was.
Yeah, I mean, the site didn't, it looked at the project site. So when we did the applicant prepared the phase 2 soil analysis, they looked at that site. And what I had called out in the phase 1 was the potential for pesticides. So they dig so deep based off of that. They don't go, the water leaking is, chemicals leaking is very different from a pesticide.
Are they two different APN numbers?
Yes.
I think that's why.
Yeah, and they're listed in the yeah.
Okay.
So, so why would the APN for the hotel have ended up on the EnviroStore site? That's one, and then the other part is they were studying PCE and TCE and a few other things for the dry cleaner site. Not these were things that were not studied when they did the 3-foot borings at the hotel.
So I guess I would refer you to, I'm not sure which attachment in terms of a letter it is, but it's the PlaceWorks May 30th responses to comments memo, which includes the response to your comment. The reason that it shows up as one site is because of the common ownership of that site. So the sites are under one common ownership, and that's how they end up listed, right? So there's 7 contiguous APNs, if you will. All 7 of those APNs were listed in the EnviroStore database. Again, I don't know if that was an error when they listed them originally, or if they were listing them simply because they all had the same owner and they were tied together. They've been tied together for the city's purposes, for entitlement purposes, for lots of reasons for many, many years. I would note, just some highlights from the response to comments along the same lines as PlaceWorks mentioned. I mean, this really is not located on the same site. The phase 1 ESA studied the project site itself, which is why this issue didn't come up to begin with. This is really on the other side. And there's a whole lot of detail in the response to comments memo that talks about where the specific location was, the removal of those chemicals from that location, and what's been done subsequently.
Is there any conflict of interest having the same company doing the soil testing for the EnviroStore, I believe that's DTSC, cleanup, and also having that same company be doing the testing for the hotel and essentially working for the same business?
Quite often, we hire the experts for a particular site. I don't know why this particular expert was hired here, and I think the city attorney can probably address whether they think there's a conflict of interest from the city's purposes. We don't think so.
I think, Terry, you wanted to say something?
With respect to the phase one and the limited phase one, or the limited soil samples, our engineers at Placeworks serve as a third-party peer review for that. So we're not in cahoots with Northgate. We just have our engineers peer review that they followed the proper procedures for both the phase one and the soil testing.
Any more comments from our commissioners? Any other comments from city staff? Okay, let's open up to public discussion. First person here is Keith Warner. Please come on up.
Good evening. I'm Keith Warner, and I'm speaking as a resident of Cupertino and a local business owner. And this isn't in my notes, but I first want to share my experience picking up my mod pizza. And so when I come from Homestead Road down North Wolf, I would never go into either of the first two driveways, the Starbucks or before Mod Pizza, and it's because of the way I park. And it drives my wife crazy, but I always go to the furthest place away where I know there's parking spaces. I park and then I walk to the business. And she likes to follow the people with the bags, you know, and go right behind them and hope they're gonna, you know, it's gonna be that car or that car. But so it's a different strategy. And the best way to get to the parking lot there that always has spaces available is that right-hand turn driveway, because it goes straight back to the top floor of the garage that never gets used. And so it's me and about 10 other cars up there, even while everybody else down on the surface is, you know, jockeying around and searching for spaces. So, so I think it's a really good idea to have that, that right turn in there. And it's just really the best way to get to that back garage. But the other reasons I'm in favor of the new hotel is that businesses in Cupertino need more hotel capacity. It's close to Apple Park, so guests can walk or bike to their meetings at Apple. It's right off the freeway. Many people currently staying in hotels stay further away outside of the city and then commute into work to work with our businesses, thus creating more traffic than if they stayed in our city. The hotel will generate significant transient occupancy tax revenue. There'll be no impact on schools. The project completely conforms to the zoning for the site, and the only general plan amendment they need is an increase in the hotel room allocation. So I urge you to recommend to City Council that they approve the general plan amendment and ultimately this hotel project at Cupertino Village. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Next on the list is Jennifer Griffin.
Good evening, Planning Commission. I'm Jennifer Griffin, and I commend Kimco for keeping this site retail. I was at the planning meeting for El Paseo last week, and that is a shopping center in great distress. The Lucky's was sent out, and we don't know what's going to happen to the shopping center, and I happen to shop there, so I'm glad that Kimco realizes that having retail sites in a city like Cupertino, you have shoppers from Sunnyvale, Santa Clara, San Jose, Los Altos, Mountain View, etc. I am very happy that Kimco has worked with the city to make sure that the double row of ash trees are maintained. To me, that is my highest priority. We want to keep the look and feel of the eastern part of Cupertino. I believe that in some publication of the city that the double row of ash trees on Wolf Road are considered the hallmark of the area. Those are our parks down there. I'm always very pleased to come back into Cupertino from that direction because I know I'm home. You have big trees. And I spoke to the planner this afternoon about this, and it sounds like they're making every effort to retain as many of the big ashes there. To me, for many years, that section happened to be where the hotel was. Those big trees are some of the most beautiful things in Cupertino. And this is not an insignificant site. We are across from Apple Park. This is an extremely historical area. You have the Glendenning Barn there from the previous HP property. Glendenning Barn was from the late 1800s. I think that we need to remember that there are sections of Cupertino that are as, quote, Cupertino as you can get, and this is the heart of what Cupertino should look like to me. I'm very pleased that the Duke of Edinburgh is being retained. It has a very strong connection to the Hewlett-Packard site there. It was referred to as Meeting Room D for the Duke. And I hope that Apple takes use of that hotel. There are people I know that come back into Cupertino and immediately go to the Duke. So thank you for having the hotel retain the trees. I'm glad that Apple put in a good word for them. And I'm pleased to see that Kimco is retaining ownership of the site and is being very proactive and responsible for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Just making sure we have no more other comment cards. We've got Lisa Warren next, and then making sure we're good.
Hello. Can you hear me? Because I'm
You sound
told
good.
I'm too tall, and I always have to adjust. One quick comment about the trees. When Michael was talking, Michael, and you're going to need to answer this, about retaining those trees on the Good Neighbor Apple's request, or as part of the negotiating with them, whatever that might be. You made a comment after that they would be retained, the front row, and they're currently 70 feet tall, but that the idea was that once the trees at Apple and your other trees grew more, that they'd sort of be obsolete. I hope that there is not a plan to later remove them, because that's what it sounded like. Okay, so that's a question, and if so, that development agreement, in my opinion, needs to retain those trees forever.
I'll have them come up afterwards.
Okay, so that was not a nice surprise, if I'm accurate. So when Michael spoke at the chamber event last week, I asked him a question and he answered it, but I need all of you to hear the question and hopefully help with the right answers. So there were comments made about staff requiring activation of the front on North Wolf. That's great. The coffee shop, the spillover, the patio for the restaurant. Not knowing who this flag is and who's going to be running this restaurant or what it needs to look like, I have seen Sandhill Properties at Main Street, this is just one example, get away with being told and agreeing to activation of Stevens Creek and all the businesses on it. It didn't happen. Also, you know, whoever this flag is has to agree to all these things in the development agreement or it's not going to work. I don't want things renegotiated later where what's being promised now doesn't happen because the flag just doesn't happen to want to go along with it, just like Apple didn't when they leased the 2 office buildings at Main Street and were allowed to take the 2 retail spaces in those buildings, which those buildings were given extra height for the retail, and that retail is not truly open to the public. So there needs to be tighter stuff going on because, and I don't think Main Street had a development agreement. Is that correct? Because Peter doesn't like them. But at any rate, it has to be followed. And I've been told by the city of San Jose long ago, or no, city of Santa Clara, there's something a higher degree than a development agreement. It's a development something. Oh, now I'm not going to be able to say the good stuff. Can I say the good stuff?
Someone's going to have to grab your time. Give you time. Someone's going to have to give you time.
You're going to give me a little, oh, come on, somebody give me time.
You 20 seconds? 30 seconds?
Okay.
All right.
So I'm really glad that the 60-foot setback is happening because that helps with the straight up and down. And there is some articulation in the small curvage, which I think will help reflect. Please address night sky considerations because we do have a tall building with lots of windows. And some of the drawings appeared that the building was entirely white. Then some of the renderings appeared that it's a little two-tone with almost white and a little darker white. To me, I would prefer something less white. In some ways, it looks a little, don't get mad, Mr. Architect. It looks a little hospital-ish when it's all white. I'm not sure what color it should be. You obviously don't, I just want to understand what it really is because I don't know which rendering is right or if that's even really decided yet. It also feels a little Apple-ish, that Apple had some input on what color this would be and they're talking about things. Just saying. Okay, my 20 minutes are up, aren't they? 20 seconds.
I'm going to move you, but I'm going to give Michael a chance
Okay.
to kind of come up. Michael, I think to address
Sure.
Lisa's question.
I don't believe there is actually any white. So if it appeared that way in the renderings, then I apologize. We have a really lovely porcelain tile that it's almost like a light beige. Staff has samples of all of the materials that we submitted, so I'm sure that staff could make those available to review. Regarding Ms. Warren's comment about the trees, totally understand. It's not our intention to bait and switch or anything like that, which I realize would be a concern. I was just acknowledging in my comment that ash trees in particular don't last forever. There have been some discussions with staff and with staff's consulting arborist that the useful life of some of these trees may be nearing an end, and we've committed to be extra diligent stewards to keep these trees around as long as they can possibly survive. So I don't. If there were, it wouldn't be us that would be initiating their removal. Is I guess the point that we're making. So that was very astute of you to listen to that. But it's not our. It is our intention. Let me say our intention is to keep those the outer row of ash trees outside the sidewalk in the parkway as long as they can possibly be kept alive, and that's the commitment that's shown in our plan. So I'm happy to discuss that further offline or in any other way, but that is the intention.
Commissioner Moore, you got a question?
Yes, I have a question about the large, it looks like an oak tree that you're showing in the, on the west side of
Right.
the hotel. And you show the planter, for lack of a better word, box extending into the subterranean garage. And has someone maybe from the architect's office looked into what dimension that would actually need to be to accommodate a tree of that size? And would you end up losing parking spaces in the subterranean garage for it? Because I didn't see any dimension on the plan.
That's a good question, and I'm happy to call up Cliff Lowe, our landscape architect, to respond to that. I will say that the intention there was to show a signature element of some sort, and we went back and forth. Was it going to be a fountain? Was it going to be a piece of sculpture? Was it going to be a tree? Our intention is to try to make that tree work, but there would be some really important element there, whatever it is. Our intention is to try to make the tree work, and I'll defer to Cliff Lowe from Cliff Lowe and Associates. Sorry, Cliff Low Associates. I don't think there's actually an ampersand. My bad.
All right, thank you. Hi, I'm Cliff Lowe at Cliff Lowe Associates, and down the road, we did a similar project for the hotel. Actually, it's the Park James Hotel. We planted a 120-inch box live oak, and this is something that we had to get done and get it done right at the beginning, working with the architects, structural engineers, because that's a big tree. It's about 30 tons. And a tree of that size, we've calculated, and this is working with our horticultural consultant, that we need approximately 2,000 cubic feet of soil. And so we sized the box to be that and maybe even a little bit more. And also the depth of the planting medium is ideal for that kind of a tree.
So how deep did it end up needing to be?
Well, it's not really, once you get past 5 feet, it really doesn't make that much difference because there's no air or basically primarily no air at that level. And so we like to keep the root zone within, 4 to 5 feet deep, and it's really how wide we go. And so that's been worked in with the architectural plan and how they laid out the parking below for the structural support of this planter.
So there would be no parking that would be lost due to the tree?
No, it's
box.
already been accommodated in
Okay.
the account.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
All right.
And you're the one that did Sava Pool, if that's correct?
Pardon?
You did the pool, Sava Pool?
Yes.
Yes, okay, just checking. Thank you. Okay, any other questions, comments? We've got two, go ahead, Commissioner Moe.
So as we start into deliberation, I guess I had a few comments. First of all, I thought this was it's a great project. I think it particularly illustrates it's great to have to build a hotel here in the city limits. One part, of course, is the transient occupancy tax, which is significant. I think the other part of that is that the demand will be there regardless of whether where the hotel gets built, and so by building it in our city limits, it does benefit the city and the residents here. I think it also gives us a greater degree that we're having a discussion around design elements and how this will look. That's something that wouldn't happen were it just a block away in Sunnyvale, and so I think that having the ability to have input and some level of control of how it looks, that's also a benefit as well. So I'm glad that it's happening here. This is a conforming project in every way except for the hotel allocation. So I think that part's great as well. I think it was fortunate this area had slightly more relaxed constraints than some of the other parts of town. I think that it's a good mix and a good blend. And I think that, hopefully that will be something that will guide the thinking about how we look at limits more broadly across town. I did want to speak a little to the North Wolf activation. I've been very active with the, Safe Routes to School and with the bike ped plan. So I think that it's admirable to try to reduce the number of curb cuts. In this particular case, I go pretty regularly to Creamery Street. My kid makes me go. It's an interesting, I think that's probably, I would probably have to rate that as generally the craziest parking lot in Cupertino. So having that entrance.
Partially the occupants and drivers too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are a lot of things that are diagonal in that parking lot. And so I think that there actually is a great benefit for your sake of sanity, trying to pick the shortest path. I actually do exactly the reverse of what Keith Warner does. I will generally try to go for the shortest path and have the fewest chances to have somebody run into me. So I think that, there has been some good thinking in terms of making that a right turn in only, and constricting it in such a way that I think is useful. You did mention that it was not clear whether the bump crosswalk was something you were intending to do. I would encourage that strongly, even just to keep people from coming in too hot off of Wolf. And then I guess the only other two comments I had is there was an interesting, I think in the questions around the issue of past contamination, I don't know whether the parcel was mentioned because there has been historically a request from the planning rules here to do parcel consolidation. I would actually, that has been an element of a number of parts of the general plan. I don't know that I would, perhaps that should be rethought. I think there in particular, there are some places where there's an opportunity and a benefit when the consolidation doesn't happen. And then finally, I think it's unfortunate that this required a general plan, both a gateway hearing and a general plan amendment for this to get approved. There are, let's see, I had pulled this up. It's actually in the EIR or in the IS that the general plan allowed for 1,339 hotel rooms over the next, through 2040, but only allocated about 600 of those. And that's unfortunate because that caused, in this case, to come here. And there's clearly additional demand. There probably was some potential, had there been, there might have been some discussion about having a taller hotel here, having an opportunity to have more rooms and, and I believe more benefit for the city. But I think, in this case, we're lucky that the applicant, could live within the general plan requirements, all of them except for the presence of rooms. So I hope that that's one of the things where, on a number of elements, in a number of parts of the general plan, the city's demand over the next 25 years was analyzed, but only a subset of that. Usually about a third was actually set into the allocation table. So I've complained in the past about the citywide allocation table, and I think that this is, maybe this is another example of where it's unfortunate that that this has caused the extra time and expense, to get this project to move forward. It never hurts to have the opportunity. I mean, we would have come to have this hearing in any case to approve the other elements of the plan. So I think that's it for my comments. Thanks.
All right, I'm going to put a motion on there. I actually asked for a motion. Is there a movement to recommend that the city council approve a mitigated negative declaration? Or you want to add something before we do that?
Yes, I would like to make some comments. So I did visit the site in March, and I really appreciated the work from the developer to negotiate and collaborate on the project. I particularly liked the roof deck entertainment, and I made the suggestion, noticing that you probably have a good view of the Santa Cruz Mountains, that if you could provide some seating that was over on, that would be the southwest side, that might be very nice. I've already stated my criticism of the MND, that I believe the changes needed to go to the Environmental Review Committee so that the final MND was sent to us here at the Planning Commission, and that we had a second set of eyes before we looked at it, since there were changes to it. That being said, I've looked through the EnviroStore DTSC site. I see that the cleaners are at the same elevation. I've looked at the rings of the testing that they've done, and I'm comfortable with the final MND. I also want to praise the fritting and the ideas of the developer agreements, and I hope that the details get worked out, and particularly with the meeting rooms. And I like the one-lane entrance solution that you came up with, because I saw that was something kind of tricky. And again, I really appreciate the willingness to collaborate, and it sounds like everyone got along pretty well on this project. Thank you.
I'll echo a lot of what Commissioner Moore said. I think the overall design blends well into the area. It's modern. It looks sort of like the Apple Park across the way, so it's not that you are going to see something jarringly different if you turn left or right on Wolf. I like the rooftop park. I think a rooftop, not the park. I'm sorry. We're still stuck with something else in my mind. The rooftop restaurant and the fact that the views. I'm in two minds about the cutout, because I think if you have two entrances, you have to go south. it's not that much of a detour, and I do like the idea what the staff is proposing of having an open space which connects everything. In general, I feel that maybe better signage can guide people to the parking lot. I mean, I live closer to the De Anza College. I don't go there very often, and honestly, I didn't even know that there was a structure at the back. So maybe that can help mitigate the fact that people don't really know, and that they can navigate from there to there. I would like to get more specificity on the benefits which are coming, whether they happen at the time you find a hotel partner to build. But I think getting that nailed down in a manner which doesn't leave ambiguity and doesn't leave future annual renewals to become adversarial would really help. I think you probably know what's the most appropriate time to do that, but that would be useful. Because especially the shuttle, it has 3 bullet points, and then I'm not even sure you can have 3 or 4 shuttles parked in that space. So nailing which one, which of those 4 or 5 things, or 3 things which are there, would be taken care of would be interesting. That's pretty much all from my side. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Commissioners, I just want to say this may be a good opportunity if you want to disclose that you've had meetings with the applicant, but you made no assertions or decisions at the time. And also, too, is we can come back on the director's report in a future date once the project has moved forward a little bit to kind of report back the details of those items.
Okay. So, yeah.
So, I had a meeting with the applicant, I think it was in February, in February.
Yeah, I also had a meeting with the applicant in February as well.
And same with me. I've met actually a couple times over the months since the beginning of the year. I don't believe we discussed anything outside of the bounds of what was the presentation tonight.
And none of you had made any decisions or communicated any decisions at the time of your meeting?
No.
Thank you.
Did you meet?
I met, and I clearly didn't make a decision at that time.
Yeah, in fact, I remember there was a question about how much of electrical charging spots we will have there, which I had requested. I'm not sure did we get that information, like in terms of the spots we might have there in the parking lot.
Go ahead, Mike.
Hello again, commissioners. Commissioner Saxena, you did bring that up, and that was a good point then, and it remains a good point. You're right. We didn't add anything specific other than we certainly are cognizant of the fact that over time demand for charging stations for electric vehicles will go up. Our intention is to however many we think will ultimately be required, make sure that all the wiring and all of the capacity is there, and then we would add them over time. We would look to the operator, to the flag, to work with us to figure out how many to start with. But your point is certainly a good one, and we remain committed to be ahead of the demand there. So I realize if you're asking for a minimum number, I don't have that now, other than that it would be pretty foolish on our part to add such charging stations, because the people that drive electric vehicles are likely to be exactly the people that would come and stay at our hotel and walk across the street to Apple Park or go to the other locations that our guests at this future hotel will go into. So I'm acknowledging that it's not a sufficient answer. If you'd like to propose some minimum number, we can certainly talk about it. We're happy to work with staff to identify the correct number to start with. But our intention is to build in capacity to add many more as they are required. So
yeah, I think if staff has any input, do we have any guidelines on these as this?
There's nothing in our ordinance that says provide X number of electrical vehicle charging stations. I think the California Green Building Code might have a requirement now. Commissioner Moore was saying yes. So there is a minimum there. I think it's based off a function of the overall parking requirement, if I remember correctly. So we can get that number, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Thank you.
Any other comments from commissioners? Final words?
Yeah, actually, I do have one comment about the allocation part, which Commissioner Fung brought up also. To me, it looks like we rushed into a lot of allocation of one class of buildings while ignoring the impact or the need that would lead to on other classes of buildings. I think we have a lot of office space allocated, but we have very minimum hotel rooms allocated. And while to me, that's something for us and everybody to think about in terms of why that happened and how can a planning process actually have a 360 view and make allocations which are consistent, so we don't have to go through this process.
So I would actually, I agree somewhat. You know, the EIR studied 4 million square feet of office and allocated 2 million. So it also was under allocated by that same token. I think, you know, the reality is, I think I can say this because during the discussion to approve the general plan, the council was quite explicit at that time, you know, in 2014, that this was a tool through which, you know, they were gaining leverage to allocate, you know, to negotiate community benefits. The allocation for the 25-year allocation for hotels was actually used up that night in the projects that were moved forward at that time. So, you know, that's a decision that was made at that time. You know, hopefully, you know, we can just look at this as maybe we want to do that differently in the future.
I think we'll have opportunities to do that in a different meeting and a different agenda item. Let's move on to the recommended action here. Item 1, recommend that the City Council approve a mitigated negative declaration. Is there a motion to do so?
I don't know whether you want to put up the card. One of us can read that.
Yeah, I'll read the card.
I think it was the last page of your presentation.
Yeah, I got it. Annie, all yours.
I mean, I'll do it.
Yeah,
Just want to?
Go ahead.
Good. Okay.
So the motion is to adopt the mitigated negative declaration EA 201705, approve the general plan amendment GPA 201705, development permit DP 201709, architectural and site approval ASA 201709, tree removal permit TR 201746, use permit U 2018-03, and development agreement DA 201701.
Is there a second?
Second.
If I may quickly add, I'm not sure where the discussion is on the driveway, but if you are going to remove the driveway or modify the driveway, that needs to occur to the ASA resolution. It's condition number 6 in that resolution, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure where the commission stood on that. Just need clarification if that's okay or if that's changing.
So the current resolution says remove the driveway, what we're voting on.
Correct.
And if we were to approve the single turn in, we'll have to say strike that out.
Strike that condition.
In that specific agreement.
Correct.
So can we put it back onto the screen just in case? I might have started the vote by accident there.
So,
and that would be which part? Which is it? The
It's the-
architectural and site approval?
yeah, it's the ASA.
Yep. So that's your exception.
okay, I think from the sense I'm getting, I think I'm pretty much the only one who has some doubts about it, but everybody else is okay with it. Commissioner Moore?
I'm okay with the one-lane entrance,
Okay.
yes.
So that's fine. So, city staff, how do I rephrase the motion now?
Well, you're halfway into the motion, and we can We can strike it and start from beginning, and we'll ask for a motion again, and you can ask for the motion, and then say, with the exception of a change in ASA 2017-09, to have the right-of-way.
You can finish reading and do a friendly amendment to the architecture and site approval to strike the condition of,
Okay, so should I read it again, or is that good?
Just do the friendly amendment to it.
So I
keep
propose
going and finish
a
up.
friendly amendment to ASA 201709 to allow the single right turn in into the complex.
And the right turn out.
I think they're asking for right turn in.
No, there is no right turn.
Oh, it's right turn in only? Okay, right
Yeah.
turn in. All right, I will change my driving behavior. Go ahead.
Second?
Okay, we have a second. Let's start the vote here. Okay, everyone's voted. Here we go. Ruling carries 4-0. Well, it's not the ruling, but the recommended action carries 4-0 with Commissioner Takahashi absent. Okay. All right. All right. I'm going to move. We take a 5-minute break, come back here at 9:20 and talk about ADUs and move on.